There we go, getting all of the audio set. Again, this is Javier Lopez, and welcome. This is Leading Through Change Communication Skills for Federal Executives. Really excited to have you here. Let me go ahead and share the slides for our webinar for today, and let's dive into it. Hopefully, you like the little dog here in the bottom corner, though. That looks so much like our little puppy, Finley. Just such an adorable dog. He'll have a chance to pop up throughout the slides, so let's see how many times y'all can spot him. Again, this is Leading Through Change Communication Skills. And today is April 23rd of 2026. But before we get any further, some professional materials that I need to share. And this is all about practices and medical guidance. So as a disclaimer, strategies and techniques shared in this webinar are based on coaching practices, and they're not intended to replace a professional medical or mental health care. In addition to that, even if it was medical practice, it's not information that I am your doctor to share. So please work with your appointed designated physician to be of support and value to you. So let's go to get into this. A little bit about myself. I am an executive coach. I've been one for the past over 10 years now. Gosh, time is flying. I'm accredited with the International Coaching Federation, or ICF, as a professionally certified coach. I'm also an assistant professor, and this is my picture here, one of the graduations that we have at Trinity Washington University. It's really just a beautiful time. Really love that. I've been a professor for over 20 years now. I'm also a retired federal executive. I had the opportunity to work with a number of agencies, including Homeland Security, Health and Human Services, as well as the Justice Department as well. That career also spanned over 20 years. Really interesting. And lastly, I am a self-described geek. This is a great picture with me and Sergeant Slaughter at one of the Comic-Con conventions in the New York area. Really, really cool. If y'all recall, Sergeant Slaughter was not only in wrestling, but he was also in G.I. Joe. And that was one of my favorite cartoons that I had as I was growing up. G.I. Joe was just so fun. But the agenda, hopefully you enjoy a little bit of the springtime image that we have here. First, we're going to start off by welcoming and framing our concepts for the time together that we have today. Next, we're going to understand why communication really breaks down, especially during change. After that, we'll look at some strategies that really provide for some clarity, resilience, as well as transparency. And finally, we'll look at a couple of key takeaways and next steps to help you out. So as we dive into this then, let's set some goals for ourselves. The first goal for our time is to strengthen your ability to communicate clearly during uncertainty, build trust and resilience within your team, and then lastly, of course, deliver transparent messages that drive alignment as well as action. Now, I should say this is a fantastic webinar. A lot of effort went into designing this, a lot of research that was done prior to the design of this. So there's a lot of practices, but it's not like we can say, I took a 1 hour webinar and now I've been transformed. Everything is perfect now. If we could solve things as easily, I think the world would be a much different place. So I just want to add that as a grain of salt. There is a number of ways that we can grow our capabilities to become better communicators, especially in stressful environments, but it is a step-by-step process. That's something that we can lean into. So let's go ahead and start with a bit of a check-in reflection on your leadership capabilities and skills. If you are watching this live, fantastic. Please feel free to put any comments that you have in the chat. If you are watching this afterwards in our recorded sessions, that's great too. Feel free at any point to pause the video, reflect, write some notes down, think through how this information is really connecting with you. The first question then, where is your team currently experiencing the most uncertainty or confusion? The most uncertainty and confusion. I've seen a lot of clients and colleagues who experience confusion around organizational change, processes, expectation settings from supervisors and others. The next question, how confident do you feel in the clarity of your communication during that change? And what do you think is particularly influencing that? So this idea, what is your confidence level. Sometimes it might be an interesting question to ask because we could feel confident and yet not show up in that way. Or quite honestly, the reverse. We don't necessarily feel confident and yet we are showing up in a way that's meaningful for people. So, what is that reality looking like for you? The third and the last question to consider: what is one communication challenge you are actively navigating right now? Think through some of these things as you're reflecting on this. A communication challenge, it could be something bigger, a bold question, how you're really relating to people. Maybe there's a bigger question about how you're showing up. Maybe it's how perhaps you're being perceived as well. When we look at some of these conversations a bit more closely with our colleagues, we tend to see that the communication challenges really are some simple things that can be just worked on if we had the opportunity to connect with others. So let's talk more about that. What does leadership mean? Now, when we're talking about communication impacting others, there's a big difference between what we consider to be leadership and then also what is considered to be management. And that's what this slide is all about. So let's start this off. The leadership aspect, this is people focused. These are things that we can do collaboratively, setting goals or self assessing and improving. Maybe it's managing up or conflict resolution. Again, these are all items that we could partner with others on to have some success. These are people focused. The difference then is when we look at what is management focused. These are like controlling costs, change management, providing appropriate tools, etc. These are things that can be managed, not necessarily the relationships with the people. So as you're communicating well enough, maybe the challenges are around how do you partner with people to lead some change in a management activity or a thing. And that creates kind of a question because are you applying the same techniques that you would do to manage a thing as a way to manage a person or vice versa? That can lead to some communication challenges as well. A lot of clients have been experiencing that. So let's talk about the challenges then. What typically comes up as these challenges when we think about our bigger concern today? And there's Finley popping up to say hello. Such an adorable little dog. Look at that guy. Why communication fails during change and the cost of ambiguity. These are some of the challenges really that are perceived when it comes to how we choose to communicate or how we can be effective in our communications with others. So, what is this challenge then? Let's look at the first one. And by the way, how many of you all have felt this? Where it's like a big vice grip is just on your head, just squeezing that pressure, some of the frustrations that come from how you intended to communicate, but it's not showing up in that way. It can just be phenomenally challenging and frustrating. So, I don't know. Please feel free to give me a thumbs up if you've ever experienced that as well. So here are the things. Why communication fails during change. It's because confusion, unfortunately, replaces clarity. There might be a standard way of doing something, and now that something is changing, there's some confusion around that item. It might be that the leadership or the powers that be that are making this change didn't fully consider the larger ripple effects or ramifications, maybe because they hadn't been exposed to that earlier. So there's no way of them for them to know. There's also rumors that tend to fill gaps. Whenever there is an information void, it has to be filled with something. And so people are trying to have conversations, trying to make meaning or understanding. And if there's nothing that they could hold on to that is accurate, what's going to replace it is a form of a rumor. Well, I heard this, and maybe so and so said that, and I think it's because of this. And some of it might be entirely accurate, but the very definition of a rumor is that it's not necessarily true. It's nothing that's validated at that point. It is at that stage a best guess for what is needed. Third, leaders assume that there is understanding. And I see this happen a whole lot where some leaders and organizations, unfortunately, they don't welcome the communication and the exchange. And so then they assume everything is good. For instance, for a number of years, I worked with one leader who would be very snappy during meetings when people would say something. And when I mean snappy, they would kind of like lash out. And so the people learn through observational behavior that they're not going to want to do the same thing because the last person that asked a question got their hand slapped. So why would they want to do the same thing? It just doesn't make as much sense for them. So if they're not going to do that, then they're not going to get any understanding. And then the leader is going to say, "Well, I asked you during the meeting if everything was fine, and no one had any questions then." Well, maybe they're not creating the space for the questions to be asked. Another thought is that silence really creates anxiety. If there is no information or no really known or understood concept, that then leads to a bigger confusion about how the organization is supposed to proceed. We want to know sometimes it is more important to over communicate than under communicate. If we think that there's a concern and we're hearing silence, and no one's validating or confirming what's going on, that can just lead to a number of questions or problems. That can be a big issue within organizations. Let's see, I'm sharing the wrong screen here. That's right, one more button. There we go. So let's look at these items here a little bit more closely. Again, confusion replaces clarity, rumors fill gaps, leaders assume understanding, and lastly, silence creates anxiety. Here's a good illustration, the communication breakdown cycle of what happens. First, there is confusion that replaces the clarity that's supposed to be there. Then people are trying to figure things out, so rumors are going to fill the gaps. As a consequence, the leaders might assume that there's an understanding. They could say, well, silence is a good thing, and they're going to assume that everything's good to go, and they'll make the decision to move forward. But unfortunately, there isn't enough safety involved in the organization for them to feel comfortable with the change being moved forward. And lastly, this really creates some of the larger anxieties. We see stress building, there's lower morale, there's an undermining of trust and performance in the organization as well. And this unfortunately creates a loop. Once we get to the part where there's silence because we assume everything's good and no one has the willingness to speak up because they don't feel safe, that's going to lead to more confusion, and that's going to lead to more rumors. And unfortunately, because leaders aren't listening, it's going to cause more of the challenges because they're going to assume that everything is fine because no one has said anything differently or otherwise. And then eventually that creates more anxiety and concerns. So the way to help to break through this, which we'll have conversations on a little bit here, is to break the cycle. There needs to be clear, consistent, and transparent communication. This builds a better understanding, it builds trust, and then ultimately, really, it drives trust. So let's take a second here and look at the next challenge, the cost of ambiguity. Because on the one hand, we can say that, it's fine. We're okay not to have these sort of issues. Maybe we'll still be performing just fine and relatively good as well. But there are bigger issues that continue to pop up. And unfortunately, I don't know to what degree people are really able to see that. So with that, look at this image here. Do you see a duck or do you see a rabbit? If you are looking from right to left, you can kind of see the bill there of the duck. If you are looking from left to right, the bill now becomes the ears of the bunny rabbit. This ambiguity can mean any number of different things, like we're misinterpreting what the reality is. So what are the costs then? We have misaligned priorities, reduced confidence in the organization or in the leadership. There is slower decision making that happens because we don't have everyone on board and fully performing the way that they're supposed to. There's a lot of hesitancy in taking steps, especially when we need to have something that is signed and documented for approval. A person can't approve something if they have a large amount of ambiguity around what they're seeing, if the object or the process or the approval creates that ambiguity. And then, of course, that overall leads to increased stress. We've done other webinars. I encourage you to go back and look at some of them. But these increased stress issues lead to a number of health and organizational concerns. So personal health issues, we have high issues of cardiac arrest, blood pressure, a number of long-term memory issues. It affects eating, it affects our sleep, our rest, our, again, longevity. For the organizations, these types of stressful environments really reduces the amount of productivity. It dissolves structure and culture within organizations. And by that, I mean, say, for instance, a person is feeling really stressed and they leave the organization and they have the skills, the knowledge, the capabilities, the institutional knowledge as well. That leaves the organization. And so they're trying to backfill by hiring people or creating different structures to accommodate. And unfortunately, all of the effort that went into designing the organization falls apart because there's no way for them to want to be able to continue. Because honestly, in that type of environment, why would a person do that? And this doesn't just mean individuals that are on lower levels of the organization. Some of those senior clients that I've worked with that are at the VP level or the senior executive service level in government, they can experience ambiguity as well, which leads to all of these challenges and concerns. It's not just about individuals that are at the lowest levels of the organization. So then let's look at this kind of a concept. Here is a very clear picture of a messy, challenged organization. We may see crumpled up pieces of paper or tissue. Files are kind of like thrown around. There's a bulletin board that just kind of has some things there. The content is there. It just takes so long to go through it, and it causes so much anxiety, frustration, and stress. We may know, like, this is my pile, this is how it works, I have a system. If that works for them, that's their system. But overall, for the organization, for everyone to work in an environment like this can cause a lot of issues. So let's take that and compare that to this other side, where items are neatly stored. The to-do lists that were on the bulletin board are taken care of. There's a separate means of managing by taking notes. There's also, by the way, if you notice on this side, there's the chair that's there. It's easier for us to sit down, to process, to actually do the work that is needed to be done, rather than just kind of like making our way through it. And even, of course, I like the box on the other side as well, where a lot of those papers could be neatly organized and designed. This isn't my office, by the way, although I do like the picture. So what we're meaning then is that we can transition from something of an image like this. Now, again, this could be how an individual likes to perform and do their work. But if we look at this in terms of organizationally, how are we structuring or managing? How could we even see the work that is being done? I also love, by the way, that this is just an old school computer setup. There's the giant monitors that we used to have. So when everything is just feeling like overwhelmed, bigger challenges. I even think I see, if not paper clips, then maybe they're little bugs that's crawling around on the table. Not necessarily the best of situations or visuals to have. Now we compare that to this other version where we see the information that is inputted, it is readily accessible. The data now forms a little bit more of an understanding because the information has been coalesced into points of data, or data has been coalesced into points of information, which when applied correctly allows us to develop some knowledge. That's how we can see the stats, the locations, the graph charts and such. And then when we apply that and learn the lessons from that, we grow in wisdom, which is helpful and appropriate. The larger point that we're saying here is that as you go about communicating, understand how you're connecting relatively with other people. When we think about communication skills, how are we connecting well enough with others? So as a quick check-in or leadership reflection that we have, similar to the questions that we had earlier, please feel free to either write these in the chat or perhaps even write them down as you're watching this later on. When communicating change, how often do you clearly explain the why, and what impact have you seen when you do or do not? Sometimes if we're not explaining the why, that causes a lot of the problems. Maybe if we are over explaining the why and not answering the individual specific questions, that can also cause problems. We might feel like we're going above and beyond and sharing everything that we can, but there's still questions. There might be questions that they have that, frankly, we don't have honestly an answer for. But we're afraid to share it or we can't share it. So how do we manage that? How do we show up with authenticity to help them? The second question, how do you currently acknowledge challenges within your team during change? Or even do you acknowledge the challenge? Some individuals may say, oh, I have a problem. Here's a question or concern. And they could say, oh, I just go over there and figure it out. That's why I hired you. You're supposed to go over there and work together with them. It's not, if there's a question or a concern, how can we work through and solve for the problems as opposed to just dismissing the issues? And then beyond that as well, what are we seeing as the causes of these things? Is it a miscommunication, a misunderstanding? Maybe there's something that we could do to be involved to understand things a bit. Now, also, just as a quick point on that, I'm not saying that a leader needs to go in and solve all of the problems, create as much clarity for every individual as needed as they require it, but it's this partnership. To what degree are we giving individuals the resources to fully understand and how to do their job versus assuming that everything is provided and everything is done? Like there's not going to be any issues. It needs to be a bit larger than that. So let's look at this then for our solutions. And of course, Finley's showing up again to say hello, to talk about the solutions. Such a cute little illustration, just moving around like that. The solutions are to eliminate ambiguity, have some strategic transparency in your communications, build resilient teams, and then lastly, have empathy in your leadership skills or your leadership approaches as well. So what does this mean then? Let's look at the first one. How do we eliminate ambiguity? Now, again, just because we take a 1-hour webinar doesn't mean that all of a sudden, I have seen the light and everything works perfectly now. All it took was 1 hour to watch Javier and the Gov Geeks talk about some things and everything has been solved for. No, it definitely does take a little bit more than that. But what it means then is talking through what these items are about. What do they mean? What are we looking for? Define expectations clearly, repeat key messages consistently, and then lastly, align the words with actions. What do we mean by these three things? So eliminating ambiguity. Here's a little bit of a strategy map for you to follow. The first one, again, defining expectations clearly. Be specific about the goals. We can think about SMART goals: specific, measurable, achievable, time-bound, and relevant. What are the roles, responsibilities, and the desired outcomes? So often I see organizations that I consult and work with run into challenges where, unfortunately, they cannot determine what the end result looks like. And therefore, they cannot define what success is. And so individuals working in those roles never really know what the end picture looks like. And the manager is always like, oh, well, you should figure it out, or they have this idea about what it looks like, but they can't describe it well enough. This is also known as the ROC methodology, or the ROC concept of management. And in that, a person comes to their boss and they say, the boss says to them, I want you to go outside and get me a rock. And the guy's like, what do you mean, a rock? A rock, a good rock. Go outside and find a good rock and bring it back to me. So the employee thinks, okay, and they go outside and they find a rock, a little pebble or something from the street, and come back in. And the manager gets it and says, no, this isn't a rock. I need a rock. You got to help me get a rock. And it goes back and forth because the person goes outside, gets a rock, brings it back in, and there's many definitions for what a rock looks like. But the individual manager, unfortunately, cannot describe the end goal well enough. And so there's frustration in this. There's just all sorts of ambiguity that pops up. The second issue is repeat key messages consistently. So reinforce important messages across multiple channels and touch points. Really drive an understanding. Help people to know what you're looking for. What does this look like? It needs to be very simple, clear, understandable, without as much room for interpretation or concern about it. Rather than, I thought I said in this meeting and here it was. sometimes it takes a while for us to process and understand certain things. For instance, if you are operating where you're looking to buy something for like lunch, more often than not, you may have seen multiple advertisements that then get you feeling like, okay, I feel pretty good. I'd like to have that type of sandwich or salad or what have you. And it's because of the smaller steps that they have made to remind you about that sort of an item. The more frequent the touch point, rather than I told you 6 months ago it was supposed to be like this. Well, that was so long ago. So much has happened since then. Be very specific about what you're looking for. And then lastly, align words with actions. Follow through on your commitments. Model the behavior that you expect to get. So we can't say stuff like, well, things have changed and now we need to do this and now I'm going to do that. Even though organizational items may shift, in what way are you showing up authentically for people for them to have that sort of trust? What is the alignment of what you say versus what is actually done? I've seen a lot of, unfortunately, some of the colleagues that I'm working with as clients who in their agencies have a lot of ideas about what their bosses say that they're going to get in their job. Oh, we're moving the role to a fully remote position, or we're going to allow you to lead this project, or all these other things are happening. So the words are spoken, but the reality just certainly is not what they're experiencing. And that can be very frustrating from them because then the trust is essentially lost and gone. And that means that the organization and that individual will suffer unfortunate consequences as a result of that. So the result when you follow these three areas is that you have a clear path for everyone, or at least a more clear path. I wholeheartedly understand that there are many other ways to address ambiguity. The main thought is, how are you connecting well enough with others? Do you know for sure that you've described the expectations clearly? Have you done it frequently enough for them to understand and you have the feedback and confirmation that they do understand? And lastly, are you showing up and doing the things that you're supposed to in that way as well? So this reduces confusion as well as misalignment. You find that there is a stronger confidence with your team or your organization, that there's faster decisions and execution because everyone knows their play. Everyone knows what they're supposed to be doing, their activities, and how they're going to be held accountable. They have a good understanding of what resources are available for them to do that work. Then there's higher engagement as well in performance because people feel involved in the process, involved in having conversations. And overall, there's a greater level of trust and accountability. And when I say the word accountability, it's not so much just me holding a person accountable to something, but rather it's them being able to take ownership and to take accountability for themselves. They could recognize, well, I'm falling short here. I need some support, or here's my concern, or I'm over delivering on this spot. Is this where you'd like me to pull back on here? Or I finished up this one area. I'd like to contribute to support more. What can I do to help next steps, etc.? That's more accountability. It's more of an engagement as opposed to feeling like it is separate or lost for them. For instance, I've seen sometimes where individuals and organizations could say, I did my job. Everything else that goes wrong, that's not my fault. And to a degree, they could be right. I mean, they don't want to get yelled at for doing too much. They want to do exactly what they need to do. But then how is that good for the organization? If they're like, hey, that's so-and-so's problem, that's not my problem. If you are experiencing any of that in the workplace, there might be some ambiguity that's going on. And it may be because the actions aren't aligned with words, there's inconsistent messaging, and maybe there was a unclear set of expectations that were provided. But when you partner together, you can lead towards those items as well. The next solution is to look at strategic transparency in your communications. I love this because here's a cool image. There's some students that are working on a science project, perhaps, and the solution is the chemical that they have. It's very clear to understand. It's accessible. They can hold on to it. Perhaps they partner together to even create the solution as well. So to do this, you can ask yourself, well, what is changing? Ask why this action or activity that you're trying to communicate actually even matters and what it means for the team. have a better sense of understanding regarding what the needs of the team are. Because if you don't have that, well, how can you help them to develop where they're going forward? Holistically, when we put all of these items together, you can see a great clarity in the action. So, as you're communicating, share clearly, build trust, and drive engagement. So, you recognize, well, what is changing as part of this new action or the activity? How are you communicating what that change is? What are they picking up? What are they leaving behind? Where are they growing towards? So often in organization, and honestly in our lives as human beings, the fear of change is more closely aligned with the fear of loss. They had something, and now that unfortunately is lost now. That's some fearful items. Maybe it took them a long time to develop a competency in a system or a capability in a process, and now those things are changing. Well, what happened to that individual's competencies or capabilities? Maybe they're now gone, and that's something that they're going to want to not want to let go of. So know what is changing. Why do these change even matter for them? Help to explain the reason behind the change and do it in a way that is engaging and supporting for them, not just saying, you're going to like this because of all of these changes. And by the way, I've seen that so often in organizations where they say, here's all the great things that we're going to have for this change. You should be excited, as if they are forcing the emotion on others, like compelling them to be excited about the change, rather than discussing and partnering with them to see, well, what change is possible? What new items can they benefit from? And when they engage and interact their own ideas about the change, they can be more willing to want the change. And that's a big thought, because you can't force another person to change or to want to change. They have to want it themselves, which is why organizationally, when you have a sort of a change or a quote improvement, an individual is going to do it only up to a certain point. And then if there's no accountability, oversight, or rationale for them to want to do it, they're going to go back to the same things over and over again. Like whenever there's a new manager that's brought in, or a new leader or political appointee, what have you, and they're going to institute cultural change, and everything stays the same. Here's this new computer system, here's this new software, here's this new processing, etc. And yeah, yeah, it's just nothing that really kind of changed. Peter Drucker had said that culture eats strategy for breakfast. Whenever you have all of the strategy for change and you want to implement certain things, if the culture isn't taking it, if people don't want that change, it's not going to happen. And lastly, again, what does it mean for them? Connect the changes to your team's goals, the priorities, successes. Help them to see, well, where is the value and the benefit of this? And as a result, you get some clarity in the action. There's stronger trust. There's better alignment. There's a greater impact on the work because everyone is working in that right direction that they're supposed to. So, in a general formula, be clear, be consistent, and be transparent in how you're going about your strategic communications. The next is to build resilient teams. And I love the illustration here on the left. It's a beautiful tree. We see the same tree during the summertime and the same tree during the wintertime. And the resilience is that the tree is still the tree. Despite the changing of the circumstances, the challenges that they might experience, it's still able to grow. If it is in the right environment, it's free of whatever rot or disease or flooding, etc. The stability of the tree is still going to be there because it has that grounded resilience to be there. And that is a beautiful thing as well. So how are we creating that type of an environment for our teams? How are we building resilience? Well, the strategies are about acknowledging the challenges that they're receiving rather than just writing them off or saying that it doesn't matter, being dismissive, essentially. How are they supporting each other? When you create a culture that allows individuals to grow and support as opposed to feeling isolated and alone, you're able to have a stronger, resilient team. This bigger thought that isolation is going to destroy while solitude vivifies. Um, So, for instance, Superman has the Fortress of Solitude. When he needs time away for him to rest, relax, regenerate, think about his own life and his own mind without helping the needs of so many other individuals, that's a solitude. But isolation, when you're forcing it upon people, can be maddening. There's a number of studies, unfortunately, on the negative impacts and long term behavioral impacts, even biological impacts, when we have solitary confinement, for instance. It changes the mapping of the brain. Which is just an incredible thing. The same thing happens in social environments and workplaces when people feel isolated, when they feel disengaged, when they feel non supported. A lot of problems happen. Organizations, even though they show up there because that's where they get their paycheck, that's where they get their healthcare coverage, et cetera, that can be one of the most detrimental areas. And unknowingly, leaders can be creating that in other people's lives. Another way to build resilient teams is to stay aligned to the purpose of why the team is there or why people are connecting there in the first place. And a neat thing behind that is it's not just like the purpose of the organization or your purpose as a leader. In what way are you helping the individuals to connect to their own purpose? What is important for them? And creating a shared partnership in what is important for you and the organization. When those purposes are aligned, it's a wonderful thing. You could say, for instance, an employee might say that their purpose is their family, their well being, their health, commitment to something bigger than themselves, for instance, as well. Well, if those can be supported by the work in the organization, maybe there's wellness hours or activities, flexible work policies, procedures, taking vacation or sick days to take care of themselves and be with others, as well as fulfillment, an item where a person wants to feel fulfilled in the work that they are doing with others. Maybe those things, when you combine them together, it's going to benefit everyone. But if you have the conversation, then you'll know what those purpose points are. Without it, you can just assume, and that causes many more problems to organizations, as we saw earlier. Here is a great concept about resilient people. What does this look like? When you're doing this work well, how does that show up? This is a great infographic that was designed by BetterUp. I have the opportunity, thankfully, to be a coach with BetterUp as well. Been a partner with them for a couple of years and have had a chance to work with a number of wonderful people in public and private sector organizations, nonprofit, academia. I could go on. So, what are some of the characteristics then? Having a realistic sense of control over one's choices, seeing change as an opportunity or a challenge, something that could be a wonderful thing to be excited about rather than being afraid or concerned about something. A resilient person is going to be one that secures attachments with others and has the ability to engage their support. There's connection that they have with others. They also can create personal goals as well. Because if you aren't resilient enough, you're going to be doing your best just to hold on to what you have without having any more problems or concerns popping up. It's something important to really see. Also, there's a good, strong sense of humor. There's a levity with them, a connection with something that is more lighthearted in nature, as opposed to everything being doom and gloom. They resilient individuals also demonstrate a lot of patience as well. They recognize the circumstances, but they also are patient for the right outcome that they are looking for. That is a great, great demonstration of resilience. They have a high tolerance for of a negative effect as well. If people are going to be negative, there's a good way to repel some of that negativity, or maybe even to take it and understand it in a way that is going to be balance focused. So just because there's a negative situation, there might be still something that we can learn from that. There might be a sort of a positive nature that we can get from that interaction. Maybe it's going to be more helpful, beneficial, more meaningful for them in their lives. The only way that we know about that is if we really take the time to be able to embrace it. Resilient people can do that. They also have an optimistic outlook on the world as well. They see the pattern of the positive items that give them justification for that optimistic outlook, rather than saying, here are all the negative issues that I've identified and all the problems that are going to go wrong. Maybe it's something more about, well, here are the reasons why it's going to go right. A great way, I saw a coach describe it this way, where with her clients, instead of saying the term, well, if this happens, what if this happens? What if these terrible things, and they can catastrophize? They shifted it a little bit to say, even if. So instead of, oh gosh, if this goes wrong, blank and blank bad things, they could say, well, even if this bad thing happens, here's how I can manage it, or here's how I can be prepared for it. So they are more risk focused in managing their outcomes and their concerns. Again, it is a greater sense of ownership in their ability to perform. And lastly, there is a high level of adaptability as well. As we experience concerns, those aren't something to entirely eliminate something. It's a path forward to help them grow and develop. The last solution for some of the challenges that we have in leading through change and communication skills is empathy in leadership. So it's important to develop self-awareness, to leverage empathy, and then also use intentional communication. Now, each of these are larger items that we can discuss thoroughly. But in what way are we developing self-awareness? One of the great strategies that I'd like to recommend for you all to consider is a concept known as the Johari window. So let me break down the relationship of the Johari window. Consider it in 4 quadrants. On the top left, we have known to others. And in the bottom left, we have not known to others. The top section is known to self and not known to self. So let's go ahead and work through each of the phases. The first one is, what is open? These are items that we know about ourselves. It's known to self, and that others know this about ourselves as well. These are things that everyone knows. It's a clear thing. This is an open area. The next is, there are items that we are blind to. Other people know this about us, but it might be something that we don't know about. For instance, if we walk out of the restroom and everyone sees that we have a piece of toilet paper still stuck on our shoe or something, we're blind to this issue and everyone else can see it. But what is the willingness of a person to want to provide the feedback, or ourselves wanting to receive or even seek the feedback? Sometimes, and I've seen a lot of supervisors run into this in private sector and government and in other areas, is where they unfortunately feel that they're doing well, but they are not doing well. They don't have the right sort of feedback. And this is an interesting thing, because when you are in certain levels of management, you receive different forms or opportunities for feedback. So for them, they're getting all their feedback from their leadership. And maybe they're listening, maybe they're involved, but they're not either receiving or participating in the motion to be able to receive feedback from their team members, from their colleagues, from their peers, from other stakeholders. And so there might be a lot of things that they could tell them to help them along the way. But if they're not getting the feedback, they are blind. They are just unaware of what this information is, and it causes a multitude of problems. Then we have items that are both known to ourselves, but are not known to others. These are items that are hidden from others. We choose not to share this. This is interesting because if we feel like, oh, I can't share this because then they're going to think I'm not good, or I'm not qualified, or this is my issue or problem, and it's my burden to bear, and I'm not going to share this with others. Well, all that does is it creates more issues. There's more problems that are bubbling up that other people don't know about. And so if we're not able to communicate that strain, others are going to assume everything is great. And unfortunately, it's going to lead to more problems. I also especially see this when it comes to workload management. So a person's going to say, oh, don't worry, boss, I got it. I have this handled. Everything's good. And then the meeting ends and they're like, oh my God, I don't know how to do this. I don't have the data. I don't have the information. I don't have the right training, et cetera. And if they would have just asked, if they would have been able to disclose or share with another person, it would have been easier for them. And it's not just individuals who are staff members doing this. I see this a lot of time in leaders. For instance, if you've ever tried to get had something approved in your organization, all it takes is a signature from your leadership, but they don't want to sign it because they don't know the implications, the issues, how things work, etc. And as a consequence for that, then other people, unfortunately, aren't getting their approvals. They hold on to it, and it sits there for like weeks because they don't know enough yet. But also, they are unwilling to disclose that they don't know enough yet, and that causes so many issues and problems. The last box is what is not known to the individual and what other people don't know. This is the large unknown for all of us. The cool thing is that the open box grows. If we have a chance to welcome the feedback, disclose to others, partner with others, we learn more about ourselves, other people learn more about us, and our open box continues to grow. That's expanding the open area. It's a wonderful thing. And the more that we are able to do that and gain our level of sense of self-awareness, so too can others do the same as well. That's that bigger partnership that we have. It grows more thoroughly in that way. So yeah, a lot of room for development and growth in that area there. So what are some key takeaways for our conversations today in this webinar? Clarity builds confidence. Transparency builds trust. Resilience starts with acknowledgement. And lastly, consistency drives engagement. So when we have clarity, we know for sure what we are supposed to do on something. It is a very clear, understood action or an activity. Imagine if you got furniture or something for the kitchen and you need to put something together, I don't know, an air fryer or something, but you've never known how to use it before or put it together. They just give you the item and they say, go figure it out. Well, how is that going to work? What if you've never used that object before? What if you don't have the right tools or equipment to put things together? You can struggle. Once you have clarity, then you have the confidence to do the work. The transparency really builds trust. If you have a space to create to help others, they too can create that space for you as well. The bigger thought is that leaders lead by creating safe spaces for other people to follow into. So they create this path, and that is the leadership and the followership to help one another to get to that point. And in partnering with our colleagues, and as they disclose and they partner with us, we grow our level of capabilities because we identify what really are the weak areas and what really are the strengths. And we can leverage those two to have more organizational success. We know where to invest our opportunities for development, our opportunities for growth and fulfillment. And ultimately, isn't that really what we're all looking for as human beings anyways? I mean, I'd like to think so, but I guess we'll see. So the next bit, hopefully you have enjoyed this webinar, this conversation. I encourage you all to please go to the govgeeks.com to learn more. You can sign up for our newsletters, some resources and materials. If you're interested in coaching, more than happy to have a consultation to help you figure out what that would look like. We're also launching some great courses as well, so that is a wonderful thing for you to see. If you'd like one-on-one executive coaching, there are sessions that we can have here as well, packages. Organizationally, these are one of the biggest areas that executive coaching offers a way to connect with us. Organizations purchase a number of hours for colleagues. There's a standard package that we can do for you, or there's other specialized versions as well. So please feel free to consider that. If you'd like to do a consultation, 30-minute conversation, entirely free. Please feel free to go ahead and click the link down below. If you're watching this afterwards on a video recording, there's links available in the descriptions or on our website as well, of course. There's one more little picture of Finley. Look at that guy, always showing up, like so happy just to look around. Yeah, he's a good dog. Well, thank you all so much for your service. Thank you for the time that you've dedicated here with us today. The work that you're doing certainly makes a difference. It's meaningful. The Gov Geeks and I really appreciate what you have to offer the American people and the world, quite frankly. So thank you so much for being here. Any information needed here on the references that we used to develop this presentation, more than happy to share it. But again, please feel free to reach out. Thank you so much for your time, and I look forward to seeing you all in the next webinar. Take care.